I'm Zach.
And I'm Jeremy.
And we're at Sparky Youth. Last week, our challenge was to find a moment in your life when you're judging someone or continuously monitor if you're ever judging people and ask God for forgiveness for judging them to feel better about yourselves. And Jeremy, did you do anything for that challenge?
Yeah, so what happened was sometimes I like to talk to my parents. And then what happens is sometimes they kind of ignore me or they don't hear me. And then I kind of get impatient. But this time I prayed to God to ask for patience and thank them for being my parents and working, because since they were working they were providing for me instead of thinking of it as if that they're ignoring me. What about you?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, for me, in band, there's this one trumpet girl that I don't really like because she doesn't play that well, but then she kind of acts like she's really good. So when I was judging her for that, thinking that I'm better than her, I had to stop and realize that maybe it's because she's also upperclassman, so she's trying to take leadership to help us anyways. So could you introduce us to this week's topic?
Yeah, so this week's main verse is Matthew 18:15. If your brother or sister sins against you, go point out their fault.
So when you have a relationship with someone, you'll always have conflict. It's something that can't be avoided. But it's what you do with the conflict that really makes how well you handle your relationship.
You're not supposed to go point out their fault and just for the validation and to point them wrong. But instead you're supposed to point out their fault to show them God's grace and show them the correct way.
Yeah, hardship isn't something that's a difficulty for you to overcome, but it's more of an opportunity to show God's grace. And instead of trying to avoid conflict altogether, you should, because it's easier to just try to avoid it and not have to deal with the person that you're conflicting with. But if you confront it, and that's a good chance to show them God's grace. So a verse to go with that, Jeremy will show.
Matthew 18:16. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses.
The second verse is Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
And then the additional verse is Galatians 6:1. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted by the sin.
And lastly, Proverbs 10:12. Hatred stirs up conflict, but lovers covers over all wrongs. And so this week's challenge is pretty difficult, actually. You have to have conflict first, and whether God chooses to do that in your life or not, we'll see. But after you have the conflict, then you have to go and address the conflict. And instead of just doing anything you usually do, maybe avoid it or just no longer be friends with that person, you need to go and before you go, pray to God to help you resolve whatever you're going to do, and just be able to show them God's grace. And we hope you complete your challenge, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Bye.